Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had naval laser but better than Yuga Aoyama. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not fair. This is a truth Izuku Midoriya learned at the age of 4. Usually, this is the part where the story tells you about a boy who had nothing. A boy born empty in a world full of miracles, a silent observer in a cacophony of superpowers. But that wasn't Izuku's story. Izuku didn't learn that the world was unfair because he was weak. He learned it because he was dangerous. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, under the canopy of a playground that smelled of pine needles and sun-baked rubber. The air was thick with the humidity of early summer, the kind that sticks a shirt to a back. Katsuki Bakugo was there, of course. He was always there, the center of gravity for the neighborhood children, a boy composed of sparks and nitroglycerin and an ego that eclipsed the sun. He was standing over another boy, a weeping child whose only crime had been bumping into Katsuki's shoulder. "You think you can just walk into me?" Katsuki sneered, small explosions popping in his palms like firecrackers. Pop crackle. Pop. "You think you're better than me? I'll teach you your place, extra." Izuku had stood there, his red sneakers rooted to the dirt. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but it wasn't just fear. It was something else. A strange, low hum in the center of his stomach, a vibration. It felt like he had swallowed a battery, or perhaps a star. "Kaken, stop!" Izuku cried out, stepping between the bully and the victim. He threw his arms out wide. "He's crying!" "He didn't mean to." Katsuki's eyes narrowed, crimson irises glinting with predatory delight. "Out of the way, Deku. Unless you want to get burned too, I won't let you hurt him." "Ha! And what are you going to do? You don't even have a quirk yet." Katsuki lunged, his right hand raised, smoke curling from his palm. In that moment, the humming in Izuku's gut screamed. It wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't a muscle he knew how to flex. It was a biological failsafe, a dam breaking under the pressure of adrenaline. Izuku felt a sudden, searing rise in his body temperature. His skin felt tight. The air around him shimmered, and then, the world turned white. Vroom. It wasn't a sparkle. It wasn't a twinkle. It was a lance of pure, condensed golden energy that erupted from the center of Izuku's abdomen. It tore through his t-shirt, vaporizing the fabric instantly. The beam was thicker than a man's arm, a solid cylinder of hard light. It slammed into the space directly in front of Katsuki's feet. Boom! The force of the impact was like a physical blow. Dirt, grass, and pieces of the rubber matting were instantly atomized. The shockwave lifted Katsuki Bakugo off his feet and threw him backward 3 meters. He landed hard on his backside, coughing, his eyes wide, staring at the spot where he had just been standing. Where there had been grass, there was now a scorch mark, a trench dug into the earth, the edges glowing molten orange. Silence descended on the park. The cicadas stopped buzzing. The other children froze. Izuku stood there, panting. Steam, literal white steam, was rising from his skin. His stomach felt hot, like he had just downed a bowl of boiling soup, but he wasn't in pain. He looked down at his exposed belly button. A faint golden light was still leaking from it, refracting through the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. Katsuki scrambled to his feet, stood on his nose. He didn't look angry. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo looked terrified. "What?" Katsuki whispered, his voice trembling. "What was that?" Izuku looked at his hands, then at the smoking crater. He felt lightheaded, dizzy, and incredibly thirsty. Izuku whispered, swaying on his feet. "I think I glowed." The diagnosis. The doctor's office was sterile and smelled of rubbing alcohol. Dr. Tsubasa, a round man with thick goggles, looked at the X-rays pinned to the light board with a mixture of fascination and concern. Inko Midoriya sat on the edge of her chair, wringing her hands. Izuku sat next to her, shirtless, a new, loose-fitting hospital gown draped over his shoulders. His stomach was still warm to the touch. "Well, Mrs. Midoriya," the doctor said, tapping the image of Izuku's torso. "It's certainly not late blooming anymore. Your son has developed a very powerful, very complex emitter-type quirk. Is he okay?" Inko asked, her voice high with worry. He burned through his clothes. He's fine, physiologically speaking, the doctor said. He turned to Izuku. Young man, you have a mutation in your abdominal muscles and your digestive system. Essentially, your body acts as a biological reactor. You absorb ambient light and metabolic energy, condense it in a specialized organ behind your navel, let's call it a core, and expel it as high-density photonic energy. Like a laser? Izuku asked, his eyes wide. Like a particle cannon, the doctor corrected. Most light-based quarks are simple flash bangs or low-heat beams. Yours? The output readings we got just from his stress test were off the charts. It's continuous, highly concentrated, and carries significant kinetic force and thermal energy. The doctor sat down, his expression serious. However, there is a drawback. A significant one. Drawback? Inko squeaked. Thermodynamics, the doctor said bluntly. Energy creates heat. When Izuku fires that beam, he is channeling immense temperatures through his body. He has biological valves, muscular shutters, essentially, that protect his internal organs, but his skin and his core temperature are vulnerable. If he fires it for too long, or at too high an intensity, he risks heat stroke, severe dehydration, or even cooking himself from the inside out. He looked Izuku in the eye. You have a Ferrari engine in a bicycle, kid. You have to be careful. You can't just fire this off whenever you want. You need to manage your heat. Izuku looked down at his stomach. A Ferrari engine. A particle cannon. Can I be a hero? Izuku asked, the question tumbling out before he could stop it. The doctor paused. Usually, he told kids without quirks to give up. Or he told kids with long fingers that they'd make good typists. But this? This was a weapon. With a power like that? The doctor mused. You could be a hero. Or you could be a natural disaster. It all depends on whether you can handle the burn. 10 years later, Aldera Junior High was a place where dreams went to die, usually suffocated by mediocrity and the crushing weight of societal expectations. But in Class 3A, the atmosphere was different. It was volatile. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your future, the teacher announced, slapping a stack of papers onto his desk. I would pass out these career aptitude forms, but... He grabbed the stack and threw them into the air, the papers raining down like confetti. Why bother? I know you all want to go into the hero course, the class erupted. Cheers, shouts, and the activation of a dozen minor quirks filled the room. Someone elongated their eyes, someone else levitated a pencil. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waving them down. But remember, no quirk usage in school. Except... The teacher's eyes slid to the back of the room. Midoriya, don't ignite anything. The AC is barely working as it is. Izuku Midoriya sat near the back, his head down, scribbling furiously in a burnt orange notebook. He was 14 now. His messy green hair was a little shorter, kept out of his eyes. He wore the standard black uniform, but he wore it differently than the others. The jacket was unbuttoned, revealing a specialized, thick undershirt made of a heat-dissipating polymer. I'm not doing anything, sensei, Izuku muttered, not looking up. Hey, teach! A rough voice cut through the noise. Katsuki Bakugo reclined in his chair, his feet up on the desk. Don't lump me in with these losers. These extras will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal. I'm going for the top. Ah, yes, the teacher nodded. Bakugo, you're aiming for UA High, correct? The class gasped. UA was the pinnacle. The acceptance rate was abysmal. That's right. Bakugo grinned, small explosions popping in his hands. I aced the mock exams. I'm the only one here with the stuff to make it. I'm going to surpass All Might and become the richest hero of all time. Oh, the teacher said, checking his clipboard. Midoriya is applying to UA as well, aren't you? The silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't the silence of mockery, like in the old days. It was the silence of tension. Bakugo stiffened. He slowly lowered his feet from the desk and turned his head to glare at Izuku. Deku, Bakugo growled. Izuku stopped writing. He slowly closed his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, and looked up. His eyes were green and sharp. He wasn't the timid mouse he had been at 4. You couldn't be timid when you walked around with a loaded gun in your gut. Is there a problem, Kaken? Izuku asked calmly. You think you can stand in the same ring as me? Bakugo stood up, smoke rising from his palms. With that leaky faucet of a quirk? It's not a leak, Izuku said, his voice steady. It's a core. It's a flashlight. Bakugo slammed his hand on Izuku's desk. Boom. The explosion scorched the wood, but Izuku didn't flinch. He just leaned back slightly to avoid the smoke. You're a walking glow stick, Deku. You overheat after 3 big shots. You think Yui wants a hero who needs an ice bath every 5 minutes? I've been working on my endurance, Izuku replied coolly. And at least my quirk doesn't give me carpal tunnel if I use it too much. The class held its breath. This was the dynamic. It wasn't bullying, exactly. It was a cold war. Bakugo was the unstoppable force. Izuku was the immovable object that occasionally fired a laser beam. Bakugo hated him. He hated that Izuku had power. He hated that Izuku, despite the massive drawback of his quirk, refused to bow down. You wanna die, flashlight? Bakugo hissed, sparks flying dangerously close to Izuku's face. Bakugo! Sit down! The teacher yelled, finally intervening. Midoriya, stop provoking him. Izuku sighed and opened his notebook again. I didn't say anything. Bakugo glared for a moment longer, his jaw clenched tight, before slouching back into his seat. Just wait until the entrance exam, Deku. I'll show you the difference between a firecracker and a nuke. Izuku didn't respond. He just placed a hand absently over his stomach. Under the fabric, the core hummed, a low, rhythmic vibration that never truly went away. The tunnel. School ended, and Izuku packed his bag quickly. He wanted to avoid the post-school rush, and specifically, he wanted to avoid Bakugo. He walked the long way home, taking the route that went under the highway overpass. It was a dark, grime-encrusted tunnel, usually empty. It was the perfect place to think. Izuku pulled his notebook out as he walked. Entry, empty lady. Gigantification. Useful for crowd control and heavy lifting, but collateral damage is a massive risk in urban centers. She needs to work on spatial awareness. He tapped his pen against his chin. Collateral damage. That was Izuku's biggest fear. His quirk, Solar Core, was destructive. Incredibly so. Unlike Aoyama from Class B, whose naval lasers seemed to act more like a concussive force, Izuku's beam generated immense heat. He could melt steel. He could start fires. He remembered the time he sneezed when he was 8 and accidentally sliced a lamppost in half. The city had fined his mother heavily. Since then, he had practiced control relentlessly. Not power, he had plenty of that, but restraint. Restraint, he muttered to himself. Focus. Refraction. He was so deep in thought he didn't hear the manhole cover slide open behind him. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A wet, gurgling voice slithered through the air. Izuku spun around. Rising from the sewage grate was a monstrosity of sludge. It looked like a living oil spill, thick and viscous, with 2 manic, bulging eyes floating in the muck. You'll do nicely, the villain hissed, lunging forward. Izuku's combat instincts, honed by years of dodging Bakugo's explosions, kicked in. He didn't scream. He didn't freeze. He planted his feet. Core activation. Level 1. Flash. Izuku lifted his shirt slightly and flexed his abdominal muscles. A burst of blinding white light erupted from his navel, not a beam, but a strobe. It was designed to disorient. The tunnel lit up as if a star had been born inside it. GAH. The villain recoiled, the sludge bubbling as the light hit it. My eyes. What the hell? Izuku took the opening and scrambled backward, putting distance between them. Stay back! He shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. I have a powerful quirk and I am authorized to use it in self-defense. Authorized? The villain laughed, a wet, sloppy sound. You're just a kid. I don't care about your light show. I just need your body to hide in. The sludge surged forward, faster this time, tentacles of muck lashing out like whips. Izuku gritted his teeth. The flash hadn't been enough. He needed kinetic force. Core activation. Level 3. Pulse. Izuku jumped, tucking his knees to his chest, and fired a concussive blast of golden energy at the ground in front of him. Tum! The beam struck the concrete, and the recoil launched Izuku backward through the air, acting like a thruster. He flew 10 feet back, landing in a crouch. It was a move he called recoil dash, but the villain was relentless. While Izuku was recovering from the landing, a tendril of sludge wrapped around his ankle. Gotcha! No! Izuku gasped. He felt the sludge creeping up his leg, cold and suffocating. It smelled of rot and death. Don't struggle, the villain whispered, the sludge rushing toward Izuku's face. It'll only hurt for a minute. Then you'll just float away. Panic flared. The hum in Izuku's stomach turned into a roar. The heat spiked. If I fire a full beam now, I'll blow the roof off the tunnel. I might bring the highway down on us. The sludge covered his mouth. He couldn't breathe. The blackness was creeping into his vision. I have to burn it, just enough. Izuku focused. He visualized the aperture of his core narrowing. A needle, not a cannon. A thin, razor-sharp beam of red-hot energy sliced through the sludge wrapping his torso. Hisses. The sludge boiled instantly. The villain shrieked, retracting the tentacle. Hot! Hot! You little brat! Izuku fell to his knees, coughing, wiping slime from his face. His stomach was burning. The use of the concentrated cutter beam raised his internal temperature faster than the blasts. Sweat was already beading on his forehead. The villain reformed, angry now. I'm going to kill you! He reared up, a tidal wave of muck. Izuku braced himself, his hands glowing as he prepared to unclasp the limiters on his core. He would have to risk the cave-in. Texas. Smash! Suddenly, the manhole cover flew into the air. A figure burst from the sewer system, a whirlwind of muscle and primary colors. Fear not, kid! A booming voice echoed. Why? Because I am here. The wind pressure alone was immense. A fist the size of a Thanksgiving turkey slammed into the sludge villain. The air pressure scattered the villain instantly, splashing him against the walls of the tunnel in a harmless drizzle of goo. Izuku shielded his face from the gale force wind. When he looked up, the sludge was gone, and standing there, striking a pose, was the number 1 hero. All Might? Izuku squeaked. The hero laughed, a boisterous sound. Apologies for getting you caught up in my justice ing. Usually, I capture them quicker, but the sewer system is a maze. All Might began scooping the scattered sludge into 2 empty soda bottles with blinding speed. Izuku stood up, his legs shaking. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the heat. He felt feverish. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thermos of ice water, taking a desperate swig. You okay, young man? All Might asked, capping the bottles. That was some quirk you displayed. I saw the light from down the pipe. Very flashy. Izuku lowered the thermos. Thank you? Can I get your autograph? He held out his notebook. All Might had already signed it. Already done. Now, I must be off to the station. All Might crouched, preparing to jump. Wait! Izuku yelled. I have to ask you something. All Might paused. No time. Evil awaits. Please. Izuku took a step forward. My quirk, it's dangerous. It hurts people. Can someone with a power that destroys, can they be a hero who saves? All Might blinked. He looked at the boy. He saw the sweat, the flushed skin, the desperation. But then, a puff of smoke exploded from All Might's body. Young man, Poof! The muscular giant vanished. Standing in his place was a skeletal, emaciated man with sunken eyes, coughing up blood. Izuku screamed. An imposter! You're deflating. The roof. 10 minutes later, on the roof of a nearby building, the truth was out. Izuku sat on a ventilation unit, listening as the skeletal All Might explained his injury, the surgery, the limit. So All Might sighed, wiping blood from his chin. You asked if a destructive power can save. He looked at Izuku. You have a powerful quirk, kid. I saw the scorch marks in the tunnel. High heat, high yield. That kind of power is a double-edged sword. Endeavor has high power, and he saves people, but he is also feared. Izuku looked down at his feet. I overheat. If I use too much power, I pass out. If I lose control, I could hurt bystanders. Everyone tells me I'm a hazard. Being a hero isn't just about the quirk, All Might said softly. It's about the spirit. But I cannot lie to you. Police work is dangerous. If you pass out after 3 shots, you're a liability. If you can't control the output, you're a danger. All Might stood up and walked to the door of the roof. Pro heroes have to risk their lives every day. So I can't simply say yes without knowing if you have the resolve to master that danger. Dream big, kid. But be realistic. Maybe look into the police force. They get to arrest villains too. All Might opened the door and left. Izuku sat there alone on the roof. The wind ruffled his hair. His stomach was finally cooling down, the hum returning to a dormant vibration. Be realistic. It wasn't a no. But it wasn't the yes he needed. It was a prove it. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the city. Izuku jumped up and ran to the edge of the roof. Smoke was billowing from the shopping district a few blocks away. A villain? Izuku muttered. Wait. All Might has the sludge villain in his pocket. He patted his own pocket. He realized with a jolt of horror that when All Might had jumped, the bottles might have fallen. No, Izuku whispered. Without thinking, he activated his core. Core activation. Level 2. Hover. 2 continuous, low-output beams fired from his palms, redirected from his core via the fiber optic channels in his sleeves, a prototype support item he made with online tutorials. He didn't fly so much as glide, leaping from the roof and using the recoil to soften his landing on the street below. He ran toward the smoke. The inferno. The shopping district was a war zone. Flames were everywhere. The sludge villain had taken a new host and was rampaging in the center of the street, causing explosions that kept the heroes at bay. It's the sludge guy. Death Arm shouted, shielding his face from the heat. Where is All Might? I can't get close. Kamui Woods yelled. My wood will catch fire. I can't spray water, there's a kid inside. Backdraft screamed. Izuku pushed through the crowd. The heat of the fire was intense, but to Izuku, whose internal body temperature frequently hit 40 degrees Celsius, it felt bearable. He looked at the villain. The sludge was churning, explosions popping from its surface. Explosions. Izuku froze. Through the muck, he saw a face. A familiar, terrified, angry face. Kaken? Katsuki Bakugo was suffocating. His mouth was covered, but his eyes were wide, frantic, searching for help. He was firing explosions wildly, but they weren't working, they just fueled the fires. The heroes were standing around. They were waiting for someone with the right quirk. They were being realistic. Izuku's legs moved. Idiot! Stop! Death Arms yelled. Izuku didn't listen. He sprinted past the police tape. Think, Izuku, think! You can't blast him. You'll kill Kaken. He needed speed. Core activation, rear thrust. He twisted his body, aiming his navel behind him. Boom! A golden pulse launched him forward like a rocket. He cleared 20 meters in a second, sliding to a halt right in front of the sludge monster. You again? The villain roared. I'll kill you this time. A massive tentacle of sludge swung down. Izuku didn't dodge. He stood his ground. Heat management, venting. Izuku opened the valves on his suit. Get off him! Instead of a beam, Izuku released an omnidirectional pulse of pure thermal radiation. It wasn't a laser, it was a flash heat wave. The air around him instantly distorted. The sludge villain screamed as the moisture in his body evaporated. The slime recoiled, shrinking back from the intense dryness. AGH. So dry. For a second, the hold on Bakugo loosened. Bakugo gasped, sucking in air. Deku? Bakugo wheezed. What the hell are you doing? My legs moved on their own. Izuku shouted, sweat pouring down his face. His skin was turning a dangerous shade of red. He was overheating rapidly. I couldn't just watch you die, the villain recovered. You little glowing pest. He raised a massive fist of sludge to crush them both. Izuku looked up. He was at his limit. His vision was swimming. If he fired a blast strong enough to stop that fist, the backlash would knock him unconscious, and the heat might sear Bakugo. I have to try. I have to. Izuku grabbed Bakugo's collar. He aimed his navel at the ground. Maximum output, recoil escape, Detroit. Smash! The wind hit them first. All Might appeared out of the smoke, forcing his buff form beyond its limit. He slammed his fist into the villain, creating a tornado of air pressure that scattered the sludge into the atmosphere and put out the fires in the district. Rain began to fall from the sudden change in air pressure. Izuku collapsed, steam rising from his body in thick clouds. Beside him, Bakugo sat stunned. The aftermath, the scolding was brutal. You moron! Death Arms yelled, pointing a finger at Izuku. You could have gotten yourself killed. You interfered with hero work. You're lucky you didn't melt the hostage. Izuku sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a cooling blanket, drinking his third bottle of water. He nodded meekly. I'm sorry. You have a powerful quirk, kid, but no sense. The hero continued. Meanwhile, the heroes were praising Bakugo. That bravery. That quirk. You held out for so long. It made no sense to Izuku, but he was too exhausted to care. His core felt like a lump of lead in his stomach. Eventually, the crowd dispersed. Izuku began the walk home, the twilight settling over the city. DKU. Izuku turned. Bakugo was running after him. He stopped a few feet away, panting. He didn't look grateful. He looked furious. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo yelled. And you didn't save me. I was fine. I was going to break free on my own. Don't look down on me, you damn flashlight. You think just because you have that flashy laser you're better than me? I'll still beat you to UA. I'll still be number one. Bakugo turned and stomped away. Izuku smiled weakly. Well, at least he's consistent. Izuku turned to keep walking, but a voice stopped him. I am here. All Might slid out from around a corner in his muscular form, then immediately poofed back into his skeleton form, coughing up a spray of blood. All Might? Izuku gasped. You really need to see a doctor about that. I'm fine. All Might waved him off. Young man. I came to find you. The hero straightened up, looking at Izuku with those intense, sunken blue eyes. Top heroes have stories about them from their school days, All Might said. Most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku's breath hitched. That happened to you today, didn't it? Yes, Izuku whispered. But I almost messed it up. I almost overheated. But you didn't, All Might said. You managed the heat. You used your head. You vented the thermal energy to dry the villain instead of blasting him. That was a pro move, kid. All Might took a step closer. I told you to be realistic. I told you that power without control is danger. But today, I saw the essence of a hero. You have a power that rivals the sun, young Midoriya. But more importantly, you have the heart to guide it. Izuku felt tears pricking his eyes. I have been looking for a successor, All Might said. Not for my quirk, you have plenty of power on your own. But a successor to my will. Someone to inherit the title of the symbol of peace. All Might pointed a bony finger at Izuku. You have the engine of a Ferrari, young man. Now I want to teach you how to drive. You can become a hero. Izuku fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The tears flowed freely now. The humming in his stomach felt different. It didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like fuel. Yes. Izuku sobbed. Yes, I will. Good. All Might grinned, giving a thumbs up. Now stand up. We have work to do. If you want to get into UA with that quirk, we need to upgrade your cooling system. I know a mechanic. Well, I know a guy who knows a guy. Also, we need to work on your aim. You nearly took off Kamui Wood's antlers. Izuku laughed through his tears. The sun had set, but for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. It glowed. The Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a graveyard of the modern era. It was a sprawling monument to neglect, a coastline choked by the rusted skeletons of refrigerators, tires, and driftwood that had rotted into sludge. It was a place where things were forgotten, but for Izuku Midoriya, it was a laboratory. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, 10 months before the UA entrance exam. The sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon, painting the ocean in hues of bruised purple and bleeding orange. Again, The booming voice of All Might cut through the sound of the crashing waves. The skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi sat atop a pile of crushed cars, holding a stopwatch and a thick textbook titled Advanced Optical Physics and Thermodynamics. Down on the sand, Izuku Midoriya stood in a wide stance, his feet dug deep into the grit. He was shirtless, his skin glistening with sweat, his chest heaving. His stomach, the epicenter of his power, was glowing with a faint, pulsing amber light, visible even through his skin. Angle of incidence, young Midoriya! All Might shouted, tapping the book. You're treating your quirk like a fire hose. It is not water. It is light. It travels in straight lines until it hits a medium. Calculate the reflection. Izuku wiped sweat from his eyes. Right. Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. Target is the microwave at 3 o'clock. Obstacle is the polished sheet metal at 12 o'clock. Izuku took a breath. He didn't just need muscle, he needed geometry. He tensed his abdominal wall. He could feel the biological shutters inside him, the sphincter-like muscles that covered his core, twitching in anticipation. Core activation, pulse mode, focus. Don't let it scatter. Coherent beam. Ha! Izuku thrust his hips forward. A golden beam, no thicker than a pencil, hissed from his navel. It struck the sheet of polished metal he had set up 10 meters away. Ping! The light ricocheted instantly, bouncing off the metal at a sharp 45-degree angle. It slashed through the air and struck the microwave door with a sharp crackle, melting the latch instantly. The door swung open, smoking. Excellent! All Might cheered, pumping a fist. Precision! That is the key. Any thug can blow up a building, but a hero must be able to shoot the weapon out of a villain's hand without singing their fingers. Izuku collapsed onto the sand, panting. He placed a hand on his stomach. It was hot, warm enough to iron a shirt on. Temperature? All Might called out. Izuku checked the stick-on thermometer patch on his ribs. 38.5. I'm climbing. Rest period. All Might commanded, hopping down from the trash pile. He landed lightly, kicking up a cloud of dust. He handed Izuku a bottle of electrolyte water mixed with coolant gel, a nasty concoction, but necessary. You're doing well, kid, All Might said, his tone shifting from drill sergeant to mentor. Your aim is improving. But your heat regulation is still the bottleneck. Izuku took a long swig of the water, grimacing at the taste. It's frustrating. I have all this power stored up. I can feel it. It's like holding back a dam. But if I let it go, I cook myself. That is the nature of energy, All Might said, sitting down on a tire. My power. One for all, it breaks the body if the vessel isn't ready. Your power, solar core, burns the vessel if the radiator isn't efficient. This had been the revelation of their first meeting. All Might had not offered Izuku his quirk. He had taken one look at the destructive potential of Izuku's mutation, and realized that giving one for all to a boy who already generated internal temperatures of a blast furnace would likely result in a nuclear meltdown. Instead, All Might had offered something else: knowledge. Strategy. The secrets of being a symbol. We need to increase your surface area for cooling, All Might continued, gesturing to Izuku's body. That's why we're doing the cardio. That's why we're building muscle, not just for strength, but to handle the recoil. Newton's third law, Midoriya. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, Izuku recited. Exactly. Photons have momentum. When you fire a beam that can melt a tank, the force pushing back against your spine is immense. If your abs aren't steel, you'll slip a disc. If your legs aren't roots, you'll go flying backward. All Might stood up and pointed to the ocean. The exam is in 10 months. I don't want you to just clear the beach of trash. I want you to clear it using physics. Use the trash to practice refraction. Use the heavy items for weight training. And most importantly, All Might grinned, his skeletal face looking equal parts scary and encouraging. Learn to fly. The physics of flight. Flight was a generous term. Controlled crashing was more accurate. 3 months into training, Izuku discovered that sustained emission created thrust. It was simple rocket science. If he emitted a continuous beam of high-energy particles downward, he went upward. The problem was balance. Center of gravity. All Might yelled as Izuku spun wildly in the air, 20 feet above a pile of tires. I can't stabilize. Izuku screamed. A thick beam of yellow light was roaring from his stomach, kicking up a sandstorm below him. He was hovering, but he was spinning like a top. Use your hands, All Might instructed. The fiber optics. Izuku had jury-rigged a training harness. Thick bundles of optical fibers, scavenged from a dump site behind a tech company, were taped to his stomach, running up his chest and down his arms to his palms. They siphoned off about 15% of the main beam's light, redirecting it out of his hands. It wasn't a perfect system. The cables leaked light, making his shirt glow, and they got hot fast. But they gave him thrusters. Izuku grit his teeth. Core output, 40%. Divert to auxiliary. Light flared from his palms. He flexed his wrists, pushing against the air. The spinning slowed. He wobbled, looking like a baby bird learning to use its wings, or perhaps a malfunctioning Iron Man suit. Hold it, Izuku muttered. The heat was rising. His blood felt like it was simmering. Temperature, 39.2 degrees Celsius. Warning, down. All Might ordered. Izuku cut the power. Gravity reclaimed him instantly. He fell 20 feet, landing in the sand with a thud and a roll that he had practiced 1,000 times. He lay there, staring at the sky. Steam curled off his body. That was 10 seconds, Izuku wheezed. 12, All Might corrected. A new record. But you look like a boiled lobster. Izuku sat up, his skin flushed a deep, alarming pink. If I do that in the exam, I'll have maybe a minute of flight time total before I pass out. Then you use it wisely, All Might said. You are not a fighter jet. You are a sniper who can relocate. You use the flight to gain high ground, or to escape. You do not dogfight. All Might walked over and handed him a towel. But your recoil control is getting better. You didn't break your nose on the landing this time. Progress, Izuku groaned. The study of optics. The physical training was brutal, but the mental training was exhaustive. Izuku wasn't just working out. He was taking a crash course in optical engineering. His room, once a shrine to All Might, was now covered in diagrams. Snell's law, the refractive index of water, the melting points of various alloys, the scattering effect of smoke particles. If I encounter a villain with a mirror quirk, Izuku muttered one night, scribbling in his notebook, I can't use a direct beam. I have to aim at the ground to create a thermal shockwave, or pulse the beam to shatter the glass with sonic frequency. He looked at his support gear sketches. He had sent designs to a few online forums, getting feedback from gearheads. Concept, focusing lens, a stomach plate with an adjustable iris. Allows me to narrow the beam to a laser cutter or widen it to a flash bang without straining my own muscular valves. Concept, coolant suit, liquid nitrogen piping? No, too heavy. Maybe a radiator system using a water glycol mix circulating through the fabric? He knew UA had the best support department in the country. If he got in, he could make these real. If he got in, the morning of the exam, 10 months vanished in a blur of sweat, sand, and equations. On the morning of the exam, Izuku stood before the mirror. The boy looking back was different. The baby fat was gone, replaced by lean, dense muscle. His neck was thicker. His core was a fortress of abdominal muscle, necessary to hold back the recoil of a sun. He wore a dark green tracksuit he had modified himself. The midsection was cut away and replaced with a mesh fabric to allow heat to escape. Underneath, he wore compression gear laced with cooling gel packs. Izuku? His mother called from the door. She looked terrified. Do you have your salt tablets? Your water? Your cooling spray? I have everything, Mom. Izuku smiled, turning to her. He grabbed his yellow backpack. I'm ready. You look so grown up, Inko sniffled. Just, please don't burn yourself. I won't. I've learned to manage the thermostat. He walked out the door, the hum of his core a steady, comforting presence. The gates of UA. The UA campus was massive, a glass and steel fortress that gleamed in the morning sun. Thousands of students were streaming through the gates. Izuku felt the familiar twist of anxiety in his gut, but he clamped down on it. Anxiety raised his heart rate. Heart rate raised, body temperature. Stay cool. Out of my way, flashlight. The voice was low and dangerous. Izuku didn't flinch. He stepped to the side as Katsuki Bakugo stomped past. Bakugo looked stronger too. He walked with the swagger of a king. As he passed, he glanced at Izuku, his red eyes scanning Izuku's new physique. You didn't quit, Bakugo muttered, almost to himself. I told you I wouldn't, Izuku replied calmly. Bakugo scoffed. Just don't melt the test sheet, Deku. He walked off, hands in his pockets. Izuku exhaled. That went better than expected. He took a step forward, distracted by the sheer size of the main building, and promptly tripped over his own foot. Classic. He braced for the impact, preparing to use a microburst from his palms to catch himself. But he didn't fall. He floated. Whoa! Izuku gasped, his feet dangling an inch off the pavement. Are you okay? A cheerful voice chirped. Izuku looked around. A girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair was standing there, her hand hovering over his shoulder. I stopped you with my quirk, she smiled, tapping her fingertips together. It's bad luck to trip, right? Oh, Izuku blinked. Telekinesis? Gravity removal, she corrected. She released him, and he landed softly. I'm Uraraka Ochako. It's nerve-wracking, isn't it? Yes, Izuku stammered. I'm Midoriya. Izuku. Well, good luck, Midoriya. Let's do our best. She waved and ran off toward the entrance. Izuku stood there, staring at his hand. Gravity removal. 0G. If I had zero gravity, I wouldn't need thrust to fly. I would just need propulsion. The heat generation would be cut by 90%. His brain instantly began cataloging the potential synergy. He shook his head. Focus. Exam first. Fanbing later. The written exam. The written test was a breeze. All that time studying physics and math with all might meant the equations on the paper were second nature. While other students struggled with the trajectory calculations, Izuku finished them in his head. Question 4. Calculate the necessary force to stop a 4-ton object moving at 60 km per hour within 5 meters. Easy, Izuku thought. But they forgot to account for friction coefficients. He wrote a note in the margin and solved it. The orientation. Everybody say hey. Present mixed voice boomed through the auditorium. Izuku sat in the darkness, muttering along with the hero's intro, reciting the hero's stats. Bakugo, sitting next to him, looked ready to murder someone. Shut up, you damn nerd. Sorry, Izuku whispered. Nerves. Present Mike explained the robots. 1-pointer, 2-pointer, 3-pointer. And the 0-pointer. Avoid it. Mike shouted. It's just an obstacle. Run away. A tall boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, interrupted to ask about a 4th robot silhouette on the handout. He also scolded Izuku for muttering. Izuku shrank back, but his mind was racing. Robots. Metal. Melting points. Wiring. Sensors. My quirk is perfect for this. Lasers are effective against machinery. No blunt force trauma recoil unless I use flight. He checked his mental thermostat. 36.8 degrees Celsius. Optimal. Battle Center B. The bus ride to the Battle Center was tense. Izuku stood before the massive gates of Battle Center B, adjusting his gloves. They were special heat-resistant gloves he had bought with his allowance. He looked around. Uraraka was there. Ida was there. He tried to walk over to Uraraka to wish her luck, but Ida stopped him. She is trying to focus, Ida said sternly, chopping the air. Are you here to obstruct your fellow test-takers? No, Izuku said, his voice firm. He looked Ida in the eye. I'm checking the wind direction. And she looked nervous. Ida blinked, surprised by the pushback. Suddenly, the gates began to rumble open. And start. Present Mick's voice yelled from the tower. There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 Most of the students froze, confused. Izuku didn't. All Might taught me to react. Core activation, rear thrust. Izuku jumped and fired a concussive blast of golden light behind him. Boom! He launched forward like a cannonball, leaving the other students in the dust. He was the first one through the gate. Fast! Someone yelled. Izuku hit the ground running, his eyes scanning the cityscape. It was a fake city, but it looked real. Target acquired. A three-pointer, a massive, treaded robot with missile launchers, rolled around the corner. Target acquired, it droned. Izuku slid to a halt. He took a breath, planting his feet. He didn't need to blow it up. He just needed to stop it. Anatomy of a robot. The sensors are in the head. The power core is usually in the torso. Izuku lifted his shirt slightly. The golden light intensified. Solar lance, cutter. A thin, concentrated beam of white-hot energy zipped from his navel. It crossed the distance in a microsecond. Zzzt. The beam sliced clean through the robot's neck joint. The head slid off with a clang of molten metal. The robot sparked and powered down. 3 points, Izuku exhaled. Temperature check, 0.2 degrees. Negligible. He ran on. The menace of Center B. 10 minutes into the exam, the observation room was buzzing. Who is that kid in the green? Midnight asked, licking her lips. He's flashy. Midoriya Izuku, Principal Nisa said, sipping tea. Quirk, solar core. A high-output emitter. High output is an understatement, Cementhouse grunted. Look at the damage. On the screen, Izuku was a blur of motion. He wasn't fighting like a brawler. He was fighting like a gunship. He used recoil dash to zip between buildings, bouncing off walls. When a robot appeared, he didn't punch it. He dismantled it. A two-pointer lunged. Izuku slid under its legs, firing a vertical beam that bisected its axle. A group of one-pointers swarmed him. Izuku spun, unleashing a strobe pulse, a rapid-fire series of blinding flashes that overloaded their optical sensors, causing them to crash into each other. He's efficient, Snipe noted. He's not wasting energy. He's targeting weak points. Hydraulics, sensors, battery packs. He knows his physics. But look at his skin, Recovery Girl pointed out, frowning. He's turning pink. He's overheating. Back in the city, Izuku was panting. Points 48. That should be enough to pass. But I need to be sure. He ducked into an alleyway to cool down. He pulled a lever on his belt, and the vents in his suit hissed, releasing trapped heat. He downed a pouch of cooling gel. Temperature, 39.5 degrees Celsius. I'm running hot. The ambient temperature in the city is rising because of the fires. Help! Izuku's head snapped up. He ran out of the alley. A student with a tail was surrounded by three-pointers. Izuku didn't hesitate. He needed to close the distance. Flight mode. He jumped, angling his navel downward. A pillar of light lifted him into the air. He rose 20 feet, hovering over the robots. Hey! Tin cans! The robots looked up. Izuku clasped his hands together, channeling the fiber optic overflow. Photon rain. It wasn't a single beam, but a scattershot of rapid pulses from his hands and core. It rained down on the robots like laser hail. It wasn't enough to melt them entirely, but the barrage of heat and kinetic force knocked them off balance, denting their armor and frying their circuits. The tailed boy, Ojiro, took the opportunity to smash the disoriented robots with his tail. Thanks. Ojiro waved. Keep moving! Izuku yelled, dropping back to the ground. He stumbled slightly on landing. His vision swam for a second. 40.1 degrees Celsius. Getting dangerous. I need to stop. The 0-pointer. The buzzer was minutes away. Izuku had 60 points. He was safe. He just needed to find a cool spot and wait it out. Then, the ground jumped. Dum. A shadow fell over the city. Izuku turned slowly. Rising from the center of the district was a monstrosity. The 0-pointer was taller than the buildings. It was a rolling mountain of green metal, its fist the size of a house. What is that? Izuku whispered. Panic erupted. Students screamed and ran in the opposite direction. Run! It's the 0-pointer. It's huge. Don't fight it. There's no points. Izuku turned to run. His survival instinct was screaming. His body was hot. He was tired. Run. Just run. He took a step. Ow! A faint cry cut through the roar of the robot's treads. Izuku stopped. He looked back. Amidst the rubble, trapped under a slab of concrete, was the girl with the gravity quirk. She was struggling, her face pained. The massive tracks of the zero-pointer were grinding toward her. It wasn't stopping. She's stuck, Izuku whispered. He looked at the fleeing students. Even Ida was running, focused on the escape. They don't see her. Or they think someone else will handle it. But there was no one else. Be realistic, All Might had said. You have a Ferrari engine. Izuku looked at the robot. It was impossibly huge. To stop it, he would need power he hadn't used since the beach. Power that would push his core past the red line. If I use that much power, I might cook my organs. I might never wake up. The robot was 50 meters from her. 40. Izuku's legs moved. Damn it! He screamed. He didn't run toward her. He ran toward the robot. He needed height. Core activation, maximum thrust. Izuku clenched his teeth, screaming as he unleashed a continuous, blinding torrent of energy toward the pavement. Vroom! He shot into the sky like a surface-to-air missile. The G-force pressed his eyes into his skull. The heat was instantaneous. His suit vents whistled, venting steam. He flew past the robot's waist. Past its chest. Up to its face. He hovered there, suspended on a pillar of light, staring into the red optical sensors of the Titan. You! Izuku roared. His skin was glowing bright red. His blood vessels were pulsating. The thermometer patch on his ribs melted. Override safety valves. Open the core. He pulled his arms back. The fiber optics in his palms flared, stabilizing him. He arched his back, exposing his stomach completely. Solar. The light gathering at his navel turned from gold to blinding white, then to a terrifying violet. The air around him ionized, smelling of ozone and burning hair. The robot sensed the energy spike. It raised a hand to swat him. Too late. Lance! KRKOM! It was the sound of thunder cracking inside a library. A beam of pure, concentrated plasma erupted from Izuku. It was 10 times the size of his usual blasts. It cut through the air, creating a vacuum tunnel. The beam struck the zero-pointer's face. There was no resistance. The metal didn't just melt, it sublimated. It turned instantly into gas. The beam punched through the head, through the neck, and continued into the sky, parting the clouds above. The upper half of the robot, the head and shoulders, simply ceased to exist. The edges of the remaining metal glowed white-hot, dripping like candle wax. The massive machine groaned. The momentum carried it forward for a second, then it tilted backward. Crash! The earth shook as the headless giant collapsed, missing Uraraka by meters. The fall. High in the air, the light died. Izuku hung there for a split second, suspended by inertia. Then, the pain hit. It felt like he had swallowed lava. Every nerve ending in his torso was screaming. His vision was gone, whited out. He couldn't breathe. The air in his lungs felt too hot. Warning. Core overheat. System shut down. He began to fall. He was limp, a ragdoll tumbling from the sky. The ground was rushing up. He had no energy left to slow his descent. He couldn't even move his arms to activate the fiber optics. I'm going to die, he thought, strangely calm. At least, I saved her. He saw the concrete getting closer. Slap. A hand struck his cheek. Suddenly, the rushing wind stopped. The crushing weight of gravity vanished. Izuku floated, suspended inches from the ground. Release. He dropped the final inch, landing softly on his back. Uraraka stood over him, heaving, her face pale green from nausea. She had crawled out of the rubble and slapped him just in time. You! She gasped, holding her mouth. You were crazy. She turned and vomited rainbow sparkles. Izuku lay there. He couldn't move. Steam was pouring off him so thickly that he looked like he was on fire. His skin was a terrifying shade of crimson. The other students began to gather, creeping back now that the robot was down. Did you see that? He blew its head off. Is he dead? Look at the steam. Move. Move. A small, elderly woman pushed through the crowd. Recovery girl. She took one look at Izuku and scowled. Heat exhaustion. Severe dehydration. First-degree burns on the abdomen. What were you thinking, Sonny? She kissed his forehead. The healing quirk activated, drawing on Izuku's stamina, of which he had none. Izuku's eyes rolled back in his head. The last thing he heard was the buzzer sounding the end of the exam. The aftermath. Izuku woke up in the infirmary. He felt like a dried husk. And 4-drip was pumping fluids into his arm. "You're awake," recovery girl said, spinning in her chair. "You scared us, Midoriya." Did I pass?" Izuku rasped. His throat felt like sandpaper. "I don't know the scores," she said. "But you certainly made an impression. You destroyed the 0-pointer. That's not something we see every year." She handed him a cup of water. "Your body temperature hit 43 degrees Celsius, she lectured. "Proteins start to denature at that heat. You cooked yourself. If that girl hadn't stopped your fall, the impact would have killed you because your muscles were too fatigued to brace for it." Izuku looked at his hands. They were trembling, but she softened her tone. "You saved her. That counts for something." The letter. 1 week later, Izuku sat in his room, staring at the envelope on his desk. It was from Yue. He had spent the week in agony. Not physical agony. Recovery girl and copious amounts of water had fixed that. But mental agony. "I got 48 villain points," he calculated for the 1000th time. "Is that enough? The average is usually 40 to 50. But I caused so much damage to myself. Maybe they think I'm too high risk." He ripped the envelope open. A metal disc fell out. A hologram projected onto the wall. "I am here." All Might appeared, wearing a yellow suit that clashed horribly with the background. "All Might?" Izuku gasped. "Young Midoriya. You are looking at the newest faculty member of UA High." Izuku's jaw dropped. "You did well on the written exam." All Might shouted. "But the practical? You destroyed the 0-pointer. A magnificent display of power. However, you garnered 0 points for that kill." Izuku's heart sank. "I knew it. A waste of energy. But—" All Might leaned into the camera. "Is that all a hero course looks for? Smashing robots?" "No." The video changed. It showed Uraraka standing in front of the judges' panel. "Please," she was saying. "Give him some of my points. He saved me. He jumped in when everyone else ran. He hurt himself to save me." Izuku's eyes widened. "A hero's job is to risk their life to turn rhetoric into action," All Might declared. "Rescue points are a hidden metric. And for your sacrifice, UA grants you 60 rescue points." The scoreboard appeared. Izuku Midoriya. Villain points, 48. Rescue points, 60. Total, 108. First place. All Might shouted, extending a hand toward the screen. "You passed with flying colors, kid! Just try to cool down a bit, eh?" All Might's face softened. "Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia." Izuku sat there, the light of the hologram illuminating his tears. He clutched his stomach, feeling the core hum in resonance with his heartbeat. He had done it. He was going to be a hero. And he was going to shine brighter than anyone. The uniform of UA High School was not designed for comfort. It was designed for prestige. The gray blazer, the dark green trousers, the red tie, every thread screamed elitism. For most students, putting it on for the first time was a moment of pride. For Izuku Midoriya, it was an exercise in thermodynamics. Heat retention is going to be an issue, Izuku muttered to himself, standing in front of his bedroom mirror. He tugged at the collar of the blazer. The fabric is a polyester blend. Low breathability. If I flare up even to 10% output, I'm going to be sweating within seconds. He adjusted his undershirt. It was a custom piece he had cobbled together in the months following the entrance exam. A mesh tank top lined with packets of phase-change material, the kind used in cooling vests for firefighters. It added a bit of bulk, making his chest look slightly broader, but it was a necessary safety precaution. "Izuku!" Inko's voice drifted from the kitchen. "You're going to be late. Do you have your thermos? Your electrolyte shoes? Your burn ointment?" "I have it all, Mom," Izuku called back. He grabbed his yellow backpack and took a deep breath. He caught his reflection one last time. He didn't look like the trembling, quirkless boy who used to cry when the wind blew too hard. He looked sturdy. The training at Dagoba Beach had carved him out of wood and wire, and the awakening of his quirk had given him a posture that said loaded weapon. He placed a hand over his stomach. The solar core hummed, a low, constant vibration, like a cat purring against his spine. It was calm today, Let's go, he whispered. The door to 1A. The halls of UA were labyrinthine, a testament to the school's massive budget. Izuku navigated them with a mix of awe and direction, checking the map on his phone. When he finally stood before the massive door labeled 1A, he paused. The door was huge, easily 20 feet tall. Designed for heteromorphs or gigantification quirks, Izuku analyzed automatically. Inclusive design. He could hear voices inside. Loud voices. Remove your foot from that desk. It is disrespectful to the upperclassmen who sat there before you and to the craftsmen who built it. Ha! Stop buzzing in my ear, Four Eyes. What junior high did you go to anyway? Izuku flinched. He knew that rasp. He slid the door open. The classroom was bright, sunlight streaming through the massive windows. At the front, Tenya Ida was chopping the air with his hand, scolding Katsuki Bakugo, who was reclining with his feet on the desk, looking like he owned the building. When the door opened, the noise stopped. Ida turned, his engines glinting. Ah! You are. Bakugo froze. His eyes, sharp and red, locked onto Izuku. For a moment, the air in the room grew heavy. In middle school, this would have been the part where Bakugo mocked him, called him Deku, and blew something up. But things had changed. The entrance exam results had been published. Everyone knew the scores. Izuku Midoriya, first place. Katsuki Bakugo, second place. The silence wasn't mocking. It was the silence of a hierarchy being rewritten. Good morning, Izuku said, his voice steady. He walked into the room, ignoring the heat of Bakugo's glare. Midoriya! Ida marched over, his movements stiff and robotic. I am Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. I must apologize for my behavior at the entrance exam. I misjudged you entirely. You perceived the true nature of the test, the rescue points, while I was blinded by the superficial objective. I hate to admit it, but you are the superior student. Oh, no, Izuku waved his hands, flushing slightly. I didn't figure anything out. My body just moved. And honestly, Ida, you were just trying to keep everyone focused. That's a leader's quality. Ida blinked, touched. You are humble too. It's him. A cheerful voice piped up. Ochako Uraraka appeared behind Izuku, beaming. The glowing boy. You made it. I mean, of course you did. Your laser was amazing. You blew the head off that robot like pow. Uraraka. Izuku smiled, the tension in his shoulders dropping. I'm glad you made it too. And thanks for, stopping me from becoming a pancake. Don't mention it. We're even. As the class filled up, Izuku moved to his seat. He felt eyes on him. He scanned the room. There was a guy with red spiky hair grinning at him. A girl with earphone jacks gave him a nod. But there was one gaze that felt different. Sitting 2 rows over was a boy with blonde hair perfectly coiffed, wearing the uniform with a strange amount of flair. He was leaning on his hand, staring at Izuku with intense, violet eyes. He was sparkling, literally. Izuku blinked. Is that a quirk? Or just charisma? The boy, Yuga Aoyama, didn't look away. He looked at Izuku, then lowered his gaze to Izuku's stomach, then back to his eyes. It was a look of profound, terrified curiosity. Izuku touched his stomach self-consciously. Does he know? Can he sense the energy? If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice was dry, tired, and came from the floor. The class jumped. Lying in the doorway, wrapped in a yellow sleeping bag like a metamorphic caterpillar, was a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the pre-quirk era. He sucked on a jelly pouch, staring at them with bloodshot eyes. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, the man mumbled, unzipping the sleeping bag and standing up. He wore black fatigues and a gray scarf. Time is limited. You kids are irrational. He reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a blue gym uniform. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. Put these on and meet me on the grounds. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The locker room. The boys' locker room was a chaotic mix of teenagers trying to change quickly while sizing each other up. Man, did you see the teacher's eyes? Eijiro Kurishima asked, pulling his shirt off. He looks intense. That's Eraserhead, Izuku said, buttoning his gym shirt. He's an underground hero. He specializes in stealth and capture. He hates media attention. Whoa, you know your stuff, Denki Kaminari said, leaning against the locker. I'm Kaminari. Electricity quirk. You're the guy who melted the zero-pointer, right? Midoriya? Yeah, Izuku nodded. He adjusted his belt. That was metal, Kaminari grinned. Literally. You turned it into soup. In the corner, Yuga Aoyama was changing with his back to the others. Izuku, being observant, and a bit of a quirk nerd, noticed something. Aoyama wasn't just wearing the gym uniform. He was buckling a thick, metallic belt around his waist, over the blue fabric. It had a lens in the center. Izuku paused. A focusing lens? Wait. He walked over. Hey, Aoyama flinched, spinning around. He struck a pose instantly, hands behind his head, hips cocked. Bonjour. You are addressing the dazzling Yuga Aoyama? I'm Midoriya, Izuku said, ignoring the pose. He pointed at the belt. That belt. Is it a support item? Aoyama's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Non. It is merely a fashion statement. To accentuate my sparkle, it looks like a refractive dampener, Izuku murmured, leaning closer. The lens curvature suggests it's meant to collimate a beam coming from your navel. And those vents on the side. Do you have a laser quirk too? Aoyama froze. The mask slipped. For a second, he looked panic-stricken. 2. I have a solar core, Izuku explained, lifting his shirt slightly to show the faint glow of his skin. I generate high-yield photonic energy. But I have to vent heat or I burn up. Your belt. It looks like it's designed to stop your quirk from leaking. Do you have leakage issues? The room went quiet. Mineta stopped trying to peek through a hole in the wall. Aoyama looked at Izuku. He had expected mockery. Or jealousy. He hadn't expected technical specs. It is a burden, Aoyama whispered dramatically, though his eyes were sincere. My naval laser. It is magnificent, yes. But if I use it too much, or without my belt, my tummy, it collapses. Stomach cramps? Izuku guessed. Intestinal distress from the recoil? It is the agony of 1,000 baguettes twisted in my gut, Aoyama confirmed sadly. Interesting, Izuku rubbed his chin. So your limiter is physical pain, mine is thermal overload. We're opposites. You have a pulsed emission that hurts you mechanically. I have a continuous emission that hurts me thermodynamically. Izuku smiled brightly. We should compare notes later. I've been reading about refractive indices. I might know a way to adjust your lens so you don't need as much back pressure to fire. Aoyama stared at him. His mouth hung open slightly. Then, slowly, the sparkle returned, but this time it looked a little more genuine. You wish to polish my shine? Aoyama asked. I think we can both shine brighter, Izuku nodded. Humph. A locker slammed shut. Bakugo walked past them, shirtless, his explosions crackling softly in his palms. Don't get chummy, Deku, Bakugo growled. Comparing flashlights won't save you when I crush you. Bakugo stormed out. Aoyama looked at Bakugo, then at Izuku. He is spicy. He's driven, Izuku corrected. Let's go. Aizawa-sensei doesn't like waiting. The assessment. The P grounds were vast, open, and scorched by the midday sun. The class stood in a cluster, looking confused. A quirk assessment test? Uraraka asked. What about the entrance ceremony? The guidance sessions? If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa said, standing with his back to them. UA's selling point is freedom. That applies to the teachers as well. He turned to face them, his eyes dark. Softball throw. Standing long jump. 50-meter dash. Endurance running. Grip strength. Upper body training. Seated toe touch. Sit-ups. You did these in middle school without quirks. That's irrational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Aizawa pointed at Bakugo. Bakugo. You finished second in the practical. How far could you throw a softball in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk. Anything goes, just stay in the circle. Bakugo walked to the circle. He grabbed the ball, his face twisting into a savage grin. He wound up. Die. Boom. A massive explosion propelled the ball. It soared through the air, trailing smoke. Aizawa held up a device. 705.2 meters. Whoa! 700 meters? That's insane! We can use our quirks? This is going to be fun. Aizawa's expression darkened. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Fun? He whispered. You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's going to be fun? He smiled, a terrifying, jagged expression. All right. Whoever ranks last in total score will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion. The class erupted in horror. Expulsion? It's the first day. That's not fair. Natural disasters aren't fair, Aizawa countered coldly. Villain attacks aren't fair. Calculated injustice is what heroes fight. If you expected a field trip to the petting zoo, you're in the wrong place. He brushed hair out of his eyes. Welcome to UA's hero course. Izuku clenched his fist. He wasn't scared. He had trained for this. He looked at the other students. Some were terrified. Bakugo looked thrilled. Aoyama looked like he was about to be sick. I have to manage my heat, Izuku thought. 8 tests. If I go all out on one, I might overheat for the next. I need to be efficient. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida and Azuri were up first. Ida used his engine quirk to blast across the line in 3.04 seconds. Like a fish in water, Tsuyu commented, hopping across in 5.58. Midoriya, Bakugo, Aizawa called. Izuku stepped up to the line. Next to him, Bakugo was stretching his wrists. Don't blink, Deku, Bakugo sneered. Or you'll miss my dust. On your mark, the robot camera droned. Izuku turned around, facing away from the finish line. The class murmured. What's he doing? Did he give up? Get set. Izuku lifted his shirt. Core activation, pulse mode. Go! BLAM! Bakugo launched himself backward with explosions, flying through the air. Burst speed. Simultaneously, a massive golden flash erupted from Izuku's navel. The concussive force of the light hammered against the air, launching Izuku backward, toward the finish line, like a bullet from a chamber. He flew parallel to the ground, hovering inches off the turf. Bakugo was fast. Izuku was a laser. They crossed the line almost simultaneously. Izuku tumbled, rolling to a stop. Bakugo, 4.13 seconds, the robot announced. Midoriya, 4.08 seconds. Bakugo slid to a halt, smoke rising from his hands. He stared at the robot, then at Izuku. You! Bakugo's voice shook. You beat me? In speed? Physics, Kaken, Izuku said, standing up and brushing dust off his pants. Light has momentum. And I have less drag. Bakugo looked like he was about to explode, but Aizawa glared at him. Next group. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku didn't use his quirk here. He squeezed the device. 56 kilograms. Above average, thanks to All Might speech cleaning hell, but nothing compared to Shoji, who scored 540 kilograms. Test 3, standing long jump. Aoyama stepped up. He fired a sparkly laser from his navel, launching himself in an arc. Non-stop twinkling. He landed gracefully. Then came Izuku. He didn't just jump. He flew. Core activation, sustained thrust. He lifted off, cleared the sandbox entirely, and kept going. He hovered over the grass for a moment, then cut the power and dropped. Cleared the sandbox, Aizawa noted. He can fly too? Ciro groaned. That's just cheating. Test 4, sidesteps. Mineta was the king here, bouncing back and forth. Izuku did well, using microbursts from his hands via the fiber optic cables he wore under his sleeves, to shift his momentum rapidly. The climax, ball throw. The sun was high now. Izuku was sweating. His internal temperature was sitting at 38.5 degrees Celsius. A low-grade fever. Manageable, but the heat was building up in his undershirt. Uraraka stepped into the circle. She touched the ball, threw it, and it floated. And floated. Infinity, the robot read. Infinity? The class screamed. That's hard to beat, Izuku muttered. Midoriya, Aizawa called. Izuku walked to the circle. He picked up the ball. It felt light. He looked at the field. 705 meters was the score to beat for raw power. Infinity was unbeatable. But he needed to show his maximum. If I use the solar lance, I can vaporize the air in front of the ball to reduce drag, then hit it with a kinetic pulse. But the heat generation. He gripped the ball. I have to go plus ultra. He planted his feet. The hum in his stomach rose to a whine. The light bled through his shirt, glowing brighter than the sun above. Solar core, 80% output. Smash! He whipped his arm forward. Whoop! The light died. The heat vanished. Izuku threw the ball. It rolled pathetically onto the grass. 46 meters. Huh! Izuku blinked. The hum was gone. He felt empty. He looked at his stomach. Nothing. I erased your quirk. Izuku turned. Aizawa was standing there, his scarf floating, his hair standing on end. His eyes were glowing red. That entrance exam, Aizawa said, his voice dripping with disdain. It wasn't rational. You destroyed the robot, yes. But you cooked yourself. Recovery girls said you were 43 degrees. You were a walking autopsy. Aizawa stepped closer, looming over Izuku. You have a powerful quirk. But you have no control over the consequences. If you fire that beam to save someone, and then collapse from heat stroke, who saves you? You become a liability. You're just a glass cannon. Izuku stared at him. The words stung because they were true. That was his fear. From what I see, Aizawa continued, you have the same reckless passion as All Might. But you don't have his durability. If you can't regulate your output, you can't be a hero. Aizawa blinked. His hair fell. The pressure lifted. I've returned your quirk. You have one more throw. Get it over with so I can expel you. Izuku looked down at the ball. He's right. If I just blast it, I overheat. If I overheat, I'm useless. He needed a way to generate maximum force with minimum duration. He didn't need a continuous beam. He needed a bullet. He picked up the ball. Think. Optics. Thermodynamics. Ballistics. He didn't need to be a laser cannon. He needed to be a railgun. Izuku turned to the field. He took a deep breath, visualizing the valves in his stomach. Don't open the floodgates. Pressurize the chamber. He wound up his arm. He wasn't going to fire the laser at the ball. He was going to use the laser to accelerate his arm and the air around the ball. He spun. Once. Twice. Building momentum. Midoriya is spinning? Kaminari asked. On the third spin, Izuku stepped forward. Core activation, compression shot. Just as his arm came forward to release the ball, he fired. Not a long beam, but a microsecond pulse of supercompressed light and heat, aimed directly behind his throwing elbow. Crack! The sound was like a whip breaking the sound barrier. The sudden injection of kinetic force and the rapid expansion of superheated air behind his arm acted like a rocket booster. His arm snapped forward with terrifying speed. The ball left his fingertips. And then, just for good measure, Izuku fired a second, thin guiding laser that struck the air directly behind the ball, creating a pocket of expanding plasma that pushed it even further. Boom! The ball disappeared into the sky. Izuku stood in the circle, smoke curling from his elbow and his stomach. He checked his internal temperature. 39.0 degrees Celsius. High, but not critical. He hadn't cooked himself. He turned to Aizawa. I'm still cool, sensei, Izuku panted, holding up a thumbs up. Aizawa looked at the device. He grinned, a creepy, genuine smile. 709.6 meters. He beat Bakugo. Kaminari yelled. Bakugo stood frozen. His eyes were wide, veins popping in his forehead. 705. 709. It was only 4 meters. But it was 4 meters. DKU. Bakugo lunged. He didn't think. He just reacted. Explosions popped in his hands. Tell me how you did that, you bastard. You're supposed to be a glow stick. How did you? Swish. A capture scarf wrapped around Bakugo, binding his arms. Gah! Bakugo struggled. Let me go! Stop using your quirks, Aizawa groaned, his eyes glowing red again. I have dry eye. It's a pain. He released Bakugo, who stumbled back, glaring murderously at Izuku. Izuku didn't flinch. He adjusted his shirt. He had proven his point. The sparkle duel. Next. Aoyama. Yuga Aoyama stepped into the circle. He looked pale. He looked at Izuku's score. 709 meters. He looked at his own belt. I cannot beat that, Aoyama thought. My laser, it is strong. But it is not a cannon. He felt a strange emotion. Jealousy? No. It was admiration mixed with despair. For years, Aoyama had been the laser boy. It was his identity. Now, he was the discount laser boy. He placed the ball down. He turned his back to the field. Naval laser! Pew! A beam of blue sparkle shot out. It hit the ball. The ball flew, decently. It landed. 350 meters. It was a good score. Better than most. But the class was silent. They had just seen a nuke. A sparkler wasn't as impressive anymore. Aoyama grabbed his stomach. Ooh, my tummy. He walked back to the group, his head hanging low. He expected the others to ignore him. That was good control, a voice said. Aoyama looked up. Izuku was standing there, holding a bottle of water. You pulsed the beam to avoid destroying the ball, Izuku noted, scribbling in a notebook he had pulled from nowhere. If you had used a continuous beam, you would have melted the leather. You sacrificed distance for integrity. That's smart. Aoyama blinked. You noticed? Of course, Izuku smiled. Us emitters have to stick together. Also, I noticed your beam arc curves slightly downward. Your lens might be misaligned by a millimeter. If we fix that, you could probably hit 400. Aoyama stared at Izuku. Tears welled up in his violet eyes. Mon ami! Aoyama grabbed Izuku's hands. You are truly a connoisseur of the shine. We shall lunch together. I have cheese. Sure? Izuku laughed nervously. Behind them, Bakugo watched, seething. He wasn't just losing to Deku physically. He was losing the narrative. Deku wasn't the outcast anymore. He was building a team. The results. The sun was setting by the time the tests were done. The class gathered around the hologram projector. Total scores, Aizawa announced. Izuku looked at the board. His heart hammered. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Izuku Midoriya. 5. Tenya Ida. 20. Minoru Mineta. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. 4th place. He was safe. By the way, Aizawa said, turning off the hologram. The expulsion was a logical ruse. Huh? The class shrieked. It was to draw out your maximum potential, Aizawa said, looking bored. That was obvious, Yaoyorozu commented. No, it wasn't. The class yelled. Aizawa turned to leave. He paused near Izuku. Midoriya, he said quietly. Yes, sir? You managed your heat better on the last throw. But you still hesitated. In a real fight, hesitation kills. Aizawa's eye twitched. Also, go see Power Loader in the support studio. Your undershirt is leaking coolant. You smell like chemicals. Izuku looked down. A blue stain was spreading on his shirt. Ah. Oops. Aizawa walked away. As the class began to disperse, packing up their bags, Aoyama sidled up to Izuku. So Aoyama said, striking a pose. About my lens alignment? Oh, right. Izuku brightened. Do you have the schematics for your belt? Or I can just look at it. I shall show you. Aoyama beamed. Bakugo walked past them, his bags slung over his shoulder. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at them. But the air around him vibrated with suppressed rage. Izuku watched him go. He knew this wasn't over. The rivalry had just evolved. Izuku? Uraraka called out. Are you coming? We're going to the station. Coming! Izuku yelled. He walked out of the gates of UA, flanked by Uraraka, Ida, and, surprisingly, Aoyama, who was currently explaining the importance of shininess in hero work. For the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya wasn't walking alone. And he wasn't just glowing, he was shining. The afternoon sun filtered through the high windows of Class 1A, casting long, geometric shadows across the desks. The atmosphere was thick with the drowsy aftermath of lunch, but there was an undercurrent of electric anticipation. The syllabus said Hero Basic Training. Izuku Midoriya sat at his desk, his leg bouncing nervously. He checked his internal temperature out of habit. 36.9 degrees Celsius. Normal. but his heart rate was climbing. I am here! The door flew open with force that rattled the frame. Coming through the door like a normal person, All Might marched into the room, wearing his Silver Age costume, the cape flowing as if caught in a perpetual wind, the yellow fabric straining against muscles that seemed carved from marble. The class erupted. It's All Might. He's really teaching us. Look at that costume. It gives me goosebumps. All Might struck a pose at the podium, his smile blinding. Foundational Hero Studies. For this class, we'll be building your hero foundation through various trials, and we're starting right away with this, a battle trial. Battle! Bakugo's voice cut through the noise, sharp and eager. And for that, All Might pointed a remote at the wall. You need these. Rows of shelves slid out from the wall, revealing numbered suitcases. Costumes made based on your quirk registrations and requests you sent in before school started. Get changed and meet me at Ground Beta. The locker room costume reveal. The locker room was a flurry of excitement. Students were pulling on spandex, armor, and utility belts. Izuku opened his case, case 18. He stared at the fabric inside. It wasn't just a costume, it was a survival system. He pulled it on. The base was a dark, forest green jumpsuit made of a fire-resistant, heat-dissipating polymer weave. It felt cool to the touch, like heavy silk. Along the ribs and thighs were armored plates that doubled as heat sinks, designed to draw thermal energy away from his core. But the most important part was the piping. A network of translucent, fiber-optic cables ran from a circular port over his navel, snaking up his chest, down his shoulders, and ending in metallic emitters on his gloves. He pulled on the gloves. They clicked into place. He snapped on his belt, which contained pouches of coolant gel and salt tablets. Finally, he pulled on a respirator mask, shaped somewhat like a diamond, that hung around his neck, ready to filter out smoke or superheated air. Whoa, Midoriya! Izuku turned. Eijiro Kirishima was admiring his own gear, a shirtless look with gear-like shoulder pads. But he was looking at Izuku. That looks high-tech, man. You look like a sci-fi soldier. Thanks, Izuku smiled bashfully, adjusting his boots. It's mostly for cooling. I run hot. It is magnificent. Yuga Aoyama glided over. He was wearing a shining suit of armor with a purple cape and, of course, his refractive belt. He inspected Izuku's setup with a critical eye. We match, Manami, Aoyama pointed out, tapping Izuku's fiber-optic chest piece. I have the sparkle, you have the glow. But your fiber cables, they divert the light to your hands, non? Yeah, Izuku nodded, checking the connection seals. It reduces the output by about 20% due to transmission loss, but it gives me directional control without having to twist my hips. I can shoot from the palm like Iron Man. Trace chic, Aoyama approved. We shall be the Knights of Light. Don't lump me in with you idiots. Katsuki Bakugo slammed his locker shut. His costume was terrifying. Black tank top, heavy combat boots, and massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets on his forearms. The gauntlets looked heavy, industrial. Bakugo glared at Izuku. Iron Man? Don't make me laugh. You're just a battery wrapped in tinfoil. It's a heat sink, Kaken, Izuku corrected automatically. Whatever. Just make sure you don't burn out before I get to you. Bakugo stomped out of the room. Ground Beta. The class gathered in a mock city, looking like a colorful array of action figures come to life. All Might nodded approvingly. Looking good, embryos. Now, let's explain the rules. He pulled out a cheat sheet. The scenario is simple. Villains have hidden a nuclear weapon somewhere in the hideout. The heroes must go in and either capture the villains or touch the nuclear core within the time limit. The villains must protect the weapon or capture the heroes. He held up a box. Teams will be determined by lots. Izuku drew a ball. Letter A. I'm A. Uraraka chirped, holding up her ball. We're a team, Deku-kun. Or is it Deku? Is that your hero name? Izuku paused. He had thought about this. Bakugo used Deku as an insult. Useless. But on the first day, Uraraka had said it sounded like you can do it. Yeah, Izuku nodded, tightening his gloves. I'm Deku. But a new kind of Deku. All Might drew the villain team for Group A. Letter D. Izuku froze. He looked across the crowd. Katsuki Bakugo held up the letter D, a feral grin splitting his face. Standing next to him, looking severe in a suit of white armor, was Tenya Ida. It's fate, Bakugo mouthed. Izuku swallowed. His core hummed a nervous vibration. First match. All Might shouted. Team A heroes versus Team D villains. Everyone else, to the monitoring room. The setup. The building was a concrete reinforced structure, 5 stories high. Inside the monitoring room, the class watched the screens. Midoriya against Bakugo, Kaminari mused. Those two have some beef, right? Bakugo was ready to kill him during the fitness test. It is a battle of light and explosion, Tokoyami said darkly. A volatile combination. I'm worried, Tsuyu added, her finger on her chin. Bakugo seems really angry. Down on the street level, Izuku and Uraraka stood before the building blueprints. Okay, Izuku said, his voice dropping into his analytical mutter. Ida is diligent. He'll likely stay with the weapon to fortify the position. He'll strip the room of loose objects to counter your zero gravity. That sounds like him, Uraraka nodded. But Kaken. Izuku looked at the dark windows of the building. He won't stay put. He's offensive. He'll come hunting for me. He wants to prove he's better, so we fight him together? Uraraka asked. No, Izuku shook his head. In close quarters, his explosions are devastating. If we group up, he can take us both out with one wide blast. And we'll run out of time. Izuku turned to her, his green eyes glowing faintly in the shadow of his mask. I'll draw his fire. I'll keep him occupied. You use your quirk to float up the outside or sneak around while he's focused on me. Find the weapon. Are you sure? Uraraka looked concerned. He looks scary. I know, Izuku said softly. He placed a hand on his stomach. But I've been running away from him my whole life. Today. I'm not running. Start. All Might's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. The infiltration. Izuku and Uraraka entered through a window on the first floor. The interior was dim, smelling of dust and old concrete. They moved silently down the hallway. Izuku's fiber optic cables emitted a very faint, ambient glow, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He dimmed them as much as possible to avoid giving away their position. Step. 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 Check your corners, Izuku whispered. They reached a T-junction. Suddenly Izuku's hair stood on end. It wasn't a quirk sensing ability. It was instinct. The instinct of a prey animal that had lived in the same house as the predator for a decade. Uraraka, duck! Izuku tackled her. Boom! The wall beside them exploded. Debris and smoke filled the corridor. Katsuki Bakugo emerged from the smoke, dust settling on his shoulders. He didn't look at Uraraka. His eyes were locked on Izuku. Come here, Deku! Bakugo lunged, his right hand raised for a follow-up swing. Izuku rolled away, pushing Uraraka toward the stairs. Go! But, go! Uraraka scrambled up the stairwell. Bakugo didn't even glance at her. You're ignoring the objective? Izuku shouted, scrambling to his feet. He took a combat stance, legs wide, hands raised, palms facing Bakugo. The objective, Bakugo growled, small pops crackling in his palms, is to show you that you're just a pebble. You think because you got a flashy quirk you can stand next to me? I'll burn those cables off your arms. Bakugo charged. He was fast. Faster than in middle school. He used small explosions behind him to propel his dash. He swung a right hook. Izuku didn't dodge backward. If I go back, he presses the advantage. Izuku stepped in. Core activation, microburst. Izuku thrust his left palm forward to meet Bakugo's forearm. A sharp, yellow flash popped from his palm emitter. It wasn't a laser. It was a pressurized pulse of light and heat. Bang! The force of the pulse knocked Bakugo's arm upward, deflecting the explosion into the ceiling. Whoosh! Heat washed over them. Don't look down on me! Bakugo yelled, spinning with the momentum to deliver a left kick. Izuku saw it. He ducked, but the heavy boot clipped his shoulder guard. The impact sent Izuku skidding back across the concrete. He reacts fast, Izuku muttered, gritting his teeth. And his swings, they're heavy. Stop muttering and fight! Bakugo roared. He aimed both hands at Izuku. Izuku's eyes widened. Double blast. Izuku slammed his hands together in a triangle shape. Core activation, flashbang. A blinding sphere of white light erupted from Izuku's hands. Gah! Bakugo squeezed his eyes shut, firing blindly. The explosions went wide, scorching the walls. Izuku used the distraction. He turned and sprinted down the hall, turning a corner. You can't hide! Bakugo screamed, rubbing his eyes. I'll hunt you down! The observation room. Whoa, Kirishima leaned forward. Midoriya actually parried him? That was a high-level reaction, All Might noted, though his hands were gripping the console tight. Young Bakugo is attacking with lethal intent. But young Midoriya, he isn't panicked. He used a localized pulse to deflect the vector of the attack. But look, Gyorosa pointed at the screen. Midoriya is retreating. In an enclosed space, explosions have the advantage. The shockwaves rebound off the walls. Midoriya's lasers are linear. If he misses, he hits a wall and does nothing. Bakugo doesn't need to be accurate. He just needs to be close. Plus, Kaminari added, Midoriya is already sweating. Look at the thermal cam. On the monitor, Izuku's heat signature was glowing orange. The duel. Izuku hid behind a pillar on the 3rd floor. He checked his suit's gauge. 38.2 degrees Celsius. Okay, he breathed. Just a skirmish, and I'm already heating up. The suit is working, but the ambient air. Kaken's explosions are heating up the hallway. It's like an oven in here. Clomp. 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 Heavy boots echoed on the floor. I know you're there, Deku. Bakugo's voice was low, echoing. You're always scratching around like a rat. Izuku peeked out. Bakugo was walking confidently, checking corners. You know, Bakugo said, raising a gauntlet. I remembered something. You have a limit. That doctor said you cook yourself if you go too hard. Bakugo grinned. So I don't need to knock you out. I just need to heat you up. Bakugo placed his hands on the walls of the hallway. Boom! 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 He wasn't aiming at Izuku. He was blasting the walls, the floor, the ceiling. He was turning the corridor into a convection oven. Smoke and heat filled the space instantly. Crap! Izuku gasped. The temperature spiked. His mask filtered the smoke, but the heat was soaking into his suit. Come out, little oven! Izuku realized he couldn't stay hidden. The heat would take him out before Bakugo did. He stepped out from the pillar. There you are! Bakugo launched himself. This time, Izuku didn't deflect. He engaged. Core activation, solar jab. Izuku threw a punch. Just before impact, he fired a burst from his knuckles. The recoil accelerated his fist. Bakugo blocked with his gauntlet. Clang. The force drove Bakugo back a step. Izuku followed up. Left jab. Right hook. Each punch assisted by a micro-thruster burst from his elbows or wrists. It was a fighting style he dubbed light boxer. Bakugo laughed. Not bad. Not bad at all for a nerd. They traded blows. Explosion met photon pulse. Pop flash. Boom. Zing. The hallway became a strobe light show of orange fire and yellow lasers. But Bakugo was winning the war of attrition. Every explosion added heat to the room. Every laser Izuku fired added heat to his body. You're getting slow! Bakugo yelled, ducking under a glowing uppercut. He planted a hand on Izuku's stomach. Take this. Boom. A point-blank explosion against Izuku's armored midsection. G.U.H. Izuku was blasted backward. He smashed through a wooden door and tumbled into a storage room. He coughed, his chest plates smoking. The armor had absorbed the heat, but the impact had knocked the wind out of him. Warning. Core temperature, 39.8 degrees Celsius. He stood up, swaying. His vision was blurry at the edges. Bakugo walked through the broken door, smoke curling from his shoulders. He looked like a demon. Is that it? Bakugo asked. Is that all the power you have? Izuku straightened up. He adjusted his gloves. Uraraka, he tapped his earpiece. Status? I'm at the weapon room. Uraraka whispered. But Ida cleared everything out. There's nothing to float. He sees me. Just hold on, Izuku rasped. I'm finishing things here. He looked at Bakugo. Why do you hate me so much, Kaken? Izuku asked. Because I have a quirk now? Because I'm not beneath you? Because you think you can help me, Bakugo yelled. You've always looked at me with those eyes. Like I'm weak. Like I need saving. I am the best. I don't need a half-baked flashlight looking down on me. Bakugo raised his right arm. He reached for the pin on his grenade gauntlet. Kaken? Izuku's eyes widened. Wait. The syllabus said those are designed to store your sweat. Nitroglycerin, Bakugo grinned maniacally. If they didn't ask for a design like this, they wouldn't have made it. He put his finger in the pin ring. Young Bakugo, stop. All Might's voice boomed over the speakers. Are you trying to kill him? At that range in a closed room. He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo screamed. Click. He pulled the pin. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku saw the mechanism ignite inside the gauntlet. He saw the spark. He knew what was coming. A blast capable of leveling the wall. He couldn't dodge. The room was too small. The blast wave would catch him. He couldn't block it with his arms. It would shatter them. Think. Physics. What beats fire? What beats a shockwave? Reflection. Deflection. Aerodynamics. Izuku didn't run. He planted his feet. He took a deep breath, feeling the searing heat in his lungs. Core activation, overdrive. He didn't fire a beam. He spun. Solar core, prism guard. Just as the explosion erupted from Bakugo's gauntlet, a massive, roaring tunnel of fire, Izuku spun his body like a top. As he spun, he unleashed a continuous, high-output ribbon of light from his navel and his hands. Because he was spinning rapidly, the beam didn't form a line. It formed a disk. A solid wall of high-pressure photons and superheated air, rotating at incredible speed. Boom! The explosion hit the spinning shield of light. Physics took over. The centrifugal force of Izuku's light shield acted like a fan blade against water. It scattered the blast. The fire and shockwave were deflected sideways, splashing against the walls of the room instead of hitting Izuku directly. The windows of the building blew out. The floor buckled. In the monitoring room, the screens went white. Midoriya! Uraraka screamed over the comms. The aftermath of the blast. Dust choked the air. The room was wrecked. The walls were scorched black. Bakugo stood panting, his arm numb from the recoil of the gauntlet. He stared into the smoke. Did I get him? The smoke swirled. In the center of the room, the floor was glowing molten orange in a perfect circle, and standing in the center of that circle was Izuku. He was shaking. His jumpsuit was singed. His skin was beet red. Steam was erupting from every vent in his suit with a high-pitched whistle. Temperature, 41.5 degrees Celsius. Critical. Izuku looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. That, Izuku wheezed, was really hot. Bakugo's jaw dropped. You blocked it? Refracted it, Izuku corrected, his voice slurring slightly from the heat dizziness. He stumbled forward. You used your big move, Izuku whispered. Now, it's my turn. Bakugo gritted his teeth. You can barely stand. You're cooked, Bakugo charged, preparing another explosion with his left hand. Izuku didn't move. He waited. Die. Bakugo swung. Flash bang. Smoke scatter. Izuku fired a burst of light, not at Bakugo, but into the thick cloud of smoke that still hung between them. The physics of scattering. The smoke particles acted like millions of tiny mirrors. The light bounced off every particle, amplifying the glare 1,000 times. The room turned into a solid block of blinding white milk. My eyes! Bakugo screamed, clutching his face. He was completely blinded. The glare was omnidirectional. There were no shadows. Izuku moved. He didn't run. He fell forward, aiming his navel at the floor behind him. Core activation, recoil dash. Tum. He launched himself past the blinded Bakugo. He didn't stop to fight. He flew. He rocketed out of the room, into the hallway, and toward the hole in the ceiling that the blast had weakened. Come back here! Bakugo shrieked, firing wildly at nothing. The weapon room. On the 5th floor, Ida was laughing. Mwahaha! I am extremely evil. I have removed all the furniture. Uraraka was hiding behind a pillar. What do I do? Deku is fighting. I have to do my part. Suddenly, the floor beneath them rumbled. What is that? Ida adjusted his glasses. Crash! The floor exploded upward. Izuku burst through the concrete like a missile, wreathed in steam and golden light. Midoriya-kun? Ida gasped. Uraraka! Izuku yelled, his voice strained. Now! Izuku was airborne, hovering near the ceiling. He aimed his gauntlets at Ida. Photon rain. He unleashed a barrage of non-lethal stun bolts. Ineffective. Ida shouted, dashing around the room with his engine quirk. He was too fast to hit. I'm not aiming at you. Izuku gritted his teeth. He was aiming at the floor. The bolts chewed up the concrete, creating debris. Creating rocks. Uraraka! Right. Uraraka touched the debris Izuku had created. Home run comet! She grabbed a pillar, which she had floated earlier while Ida was distracted by the explosion downstairs, and swung it. The floating debris shot toward Ida. A physical projectile attack? Ida braked, shielding his face. Izuku cut his engine. He fell from the ceiling. He wasn't aiming for Ida. He was aiming for the weapon. You won't reach it! Ida yelled. I am the embodiment of villainy! Ida activated his reciprocal burst, zooming to intercept Izuku. But Izuku didn't dodge. He pointed his hand at Uraraka. Sorry, Uraraka. Pulse. He shot a soft blast of air pressure at Uraraka. It didn't hurt her, but because she was floating, she had used her quirk on herself. The force sent her flying across the room, directly toward the weapon. Ida was focused on Izuku. He tackled Izuku in midair. I have captured the hero, Ida declared. But Izuku smiled weakly, steam rolling off his face. You lost the war. Ida turned. Uraraka was hugging the papier-mâché nuclear core. Retrieved. Uraraka wheezed, trying not to vomit. Nuh! Ida fell to his knees. My villainous tenure is over. Hero team wins. All Might shouted. The aftermath. Down in the storage room, the white light faded. Bakugo stood alone in the wreckage. He heard the announcement. Hero team wins? He looked at his hands. He looked at the scorched circle on the floor where Izuku had spun. He hadn't just lost. He had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outlasted. Deku! He screamed at the ceiling, a sound of pure frustration. Upstairs, Izuku lay on the floor. Midoriya-kun! Ida rushed over. Are you alright? You are extremely hot to the touch. Don't touch the metal parts, Izuku whispered. I need water. His vision went black. The review. Izuku woke up in the infirmary again. 2 times in 2 weeks, Recovery Girl sighed, handing him a sports drink. You are going to give me gray hairs, and I'm already gray. Sorry, Izuku drank the fluid greedily. Did everyone see? Yes. You're quite the topic of conversation. Izuku returned to the classroom an hour later, bandaged and wearing his gym uniform. When he opened the door, the class went silent. Then, they swarmed him. Midoriya! That was insane. You blocked a nuke? That spinning move. It was like a disco shield. Man, you're tough. Kirishima slapped him on the back, avoiding the burns. You stood up to Bakugo like a man. We should discuss the physics of your prism guard, Momo Yaorosa said, her eyes shining. The angular momentum required to create a cohesive photon barrier is fascinating. Later, Sato laughed. Let the guy breathe. Izuku smiled. He felt included. He looked around for Bakugo. Katsuki was sitting at his desk, staring out the window. He looked sullen. Silent. All Might entered the room. Excellent work, everyone. Now, for the critique. Why did the hero team win? Momo raised her hand. Because Ida was the only one who adapted to the scenario. Bakugo acted on a grudge and abandoned the objective. Midoriya formulated a plan, but his execution was reckless. He destroyed the stronghold and nearly knocked himself out. Uraraka had the best situational awareness, but relied too heavily on Midoriya's distraction. Succinct. All Might gave a thumbs up. Correct. Young Bakugo, your talent is undeniable, but your focus was wrong. A hero saves. A villain destroys. Today, you were just a destroyer. Bakugo flinched. He didn't yell back. He just gripped his desk until his knuckles turned white. The walk home. The sun was setting. Izuku walked out of the school gates. Deku! Izuku turned. Bakugo was standing there. He wasn't storming over. He was standing still. Kaken? You think you're better than me, Bakugo said. It wasn't a question. You think because you got that shiny quirk and learned some tricks, you can look down on me. I don't look down on you, Izuku said firmly. I look at you. You've always been the goal, Kaken. You were the one winning. I was just chasing. Izuku took a step forward. But I'm not chasing anymore. I'm running next to you. And today, I ran faster. Bakugo's eyes widened. Tears of frustration pricked the corners of his eyes. I won't lose again, Bakugo snarled, his voice cracking. I'm going to be the #1 hero. I'll beat you, I'll beat Todoroki, I'll beat everyone. Don't you dare think you've won the war, Deku. This was just one battle. He turned and marched away, wiping his eyes aggressively. Izuku watched him go. I know, Izuku whispered. I'll be waiting. He placed a hand on his stomach. The core was cool now, resting. But the fire in his heart was burning brighter than ever. Midoriya! Ida and Uraraka ran up to him. We were waiting for you. Let's walk to the station. Uraraka smiled. We must review the battle strategy. Ida added. Izuku smiled at his friends. Yeah. Let's go. As they walked into the sunset, Izuku's shadow stretched long behind him, not the shadow of a quirkless boy, but the shadow of a hero who glowed.